The gym smelled of sweat and rubber, the air heavy with the echo of bouncing balls and squeaking shoes. Practice had ended an hour ago, but Daniel stayed behind, running drills long after the others left. He claimed it was discipline, dedication, but in truth, it was a way to avoid going home too soon. His wife would be waiting, expecting him to settle into the quiet rhythm of domestic life. Yet Daniel lingered, restless, searching for something he could not name. The only other one left was Ethan. Younger, louder, unafraid. Ethan never seemed in a rush to leave either. He claimed he liked the silence after everyone cleared out, but his eyes always seemed to linger on Daniel a second too long, and his touches during practice always lasted a breath longer than necessary. Tonight was no different. Ethan leaned against the wall, sipping from his water bottle, shirt clinging to his chest with sweat. The overhead lights made beads of water glisten across his collarbone, and Daniel caught himself staring before quickly looking away. He bent down, tying and readying his shoelaces as if they needed the attention. "You push yourself too hard," Ethan said casually, his voice low, almost teasing. "You'll burn out before the season even starts." Daniel smirked, masking nerves with a shrug. "Better to burn out than sit on the bench." "Yeah." Ethan pushed off the wall, walking closer, his sneakers squeaking softly against the polished floor. "Or maybe you just don't want to go home yet." The words hit harder than intended. Daniel froze, heartbeat pounding in his ears. Ethan wasn't wrong. He didn't want to admit it, but Ethan had always been good at peeling back the surface, daring him to face truths he avoided. "What's that supposed to mean?" Daniel asked, standing, feigning annoyance, though his voice cracked just enough to betray him. Ethan smirked knowingly. "Nothing. Just saying, most guys don't stay this late unless they've got a reason." He paused, eyes glinting with mischief. "Or someone." Daniel's stomach nodded. He wasn't sure if Ethan meant it innocently, or if it was the kind of dangerous probing he had grown used to over the last few months. Ethan had a way of talking that blurred the line between harmless banter and deliberate suggestion. The locker room was quieter, dimmer. The sound of dripping showers echoed faintly through the tiled walls. Daniel walked ahead, forcing himself to keep calm, but the tension thickened with every step Ethan took behind him. Inside, Daniel sat on the bench, untying his shoes again, pretending to focus on the simple act of peeling them off. Ethan tossed his towel onto the bench beside him, sitting close, too close for comfort. Their thighs brushed. Neither moved away. "You know," Ethan said softly, "you don't have to keep pretending." Daniel's throat tightened. He didn't respond. He didn't need to ask what Ethan meant. The unspoken charge between them was undeniable, carved into every lingering glance, every accidental brush of skin during drills, every silence stretched too long. Faceless, the moment lived in fragments, Daniel's trembling fingers pulling at his laces, Ethan's hand brushing against his knee, just long enough to make Daniel's pulse jump, the faint fog of steam drifting from the shower room, the metallic rattle of a locker door half closed. Daniel swallowed hard. "You should head out. It's late." "So?" Ethan's voice was low, challenging, a whisper just above the hum of the fluorescent lights. "What are you afraid of, Daniel?" The name rolled off his tongue in a way that felt intimate, invasive. Daniel stood, suddenly restless, shoving his sneakers into his bag. His ring caught the light, a reminder of the vows he had made, the life he had promised. Guilt surged through him, but it tangled with something darker, desire, sharp and undeniable. "I'm not afraid," Daniel said, though the words came out hollow. Ethan stood too, taller, closing the space between them. The air thickened. Daniel could feel the heat of his body, smell the salt of his sweat. Every instinct screamed to step back, to leave, to shut the door on this temptation before it devoured him. But his feet didn't move. For a long moment neither spoke. Their breaths filled the silence, shallow and uneven. Ethan's hand lifted, brushing against Daniel's arm, a small touch, but electric, reckless. Daniel flinched, not away, but toward. He turned quickly, snatching his bag, breaking the spell before it could fully take hold. "I need to go," he muttered, his voice shaking. Ethan smirked, though there was no cruelty in it. Only certainty. "I'll give you a ride." Daniel hesitated at the doorway, every fiber of him screaming to decline. But instead, he nodded. "Fine." As they walked out together, the gym fell silent behind them, empty and echoing. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of asphalt and distant rain. Daniel's chest tightened, knowing he had just stepped across an invisible threshold. The car waited in the lot, gleaming under the streetlight like an omen. Ethan unlocked it with a casual flick, sliding into the driver's seat. Daniel stood for a second too long, staring, battling the war inside him. Then he climbed in, shutting the door behind him. The engine rumbled to life, headlights cutting through the dark. Neither spoke as they pulled out of the lot, silence heavier than words. Daniel's hands fidgeted in his lap, the wedding ring cold against his skin. He told himself it was just a ride, just a harmless favor. But deep down, he knew the truth. Something dangerous had already begun. And Ethan knew it too. The ride began in silence, the kind that hums louder than words. The dashboard lights cast Daniel's face in faint blues and reds, but the camera of this night, faceless, merciless, never lingered there. It lingered instead on his hands twisting in his lap, on the ring glinting like a warning, on the flex of his jaw as he fought the thoughts circling like vultures in his head. Ethan drove without hurry, one hand loose on the wheel, the other resting near the gearshift, close enough that Daniel could feel its presence even without looking. The radio played something faint, but neither of them listened. The real music was the shallow rhythm of their breaths and the occasional crack of gravel under the tires. "Your wife waiting for you?" Ethan asked, his tone casual but sharp, like a knife disguised as a butter blade. Daniel's grip tightened on his knees. "Yeah," he said simply, though the words sounded more like an admission than an answer. Ethan smirked, eyes on the road. "Funny. You don't drive like a man in a rush to get home." Daniel turned to him sharply, but Ethan didn't flinch. He had a way of saying things that dared Daniel to either deny or confess, neither option safe. The silence stretched again, heavier now, until Ethan flicked on the blinker and turned, not toward Daniel's neighborhood, but into a deserted lot on the outskirts of town. The car rolled to a stop beneath a flickering streetlight, the night swallowing them whole. The engine idled, humming like a heartbeat. Daniel glanced around, confusion masking unease. "This isn't." "I know," Ethan cut him off, shifting the gear into park. Then he turned, finally meeting Daniel's eyes. His look wasn't playful anymore. It was steady, unflinching, the kind of look that pinned Daniel to his seat. "What are we doing here?" Daniel asked, his voice low, defensive. Ethan leaned back slightly, his arms stretching across the back of the seat, casual but claiming space. "I figured you'd want a place where no one's watching." Daniel's chest tightened. "You're out of your mind." "Am I?" Ethan's voice was steady, but bold. He leaned closer, close enough that Daniel could feel the heat of his body, smell the faint salt of sweat still lingering from practice. "Because every time you look at me, I see it. You want this too." Daniel's pulse spiked. His first instinct was denial, but his throat betrayed him, dry and unwilling to form the words. He turned toward the window, staring at the dark lot beyond the glass, searching for an escape. But his reflection stared back, and behind it, Ethan waited, patient and certain. "You're married," Daniel finally managed, the words weak, stripped of conviction. "Yeah. You've mentioned that," Ethan replied, almost amused. His hand moved, slow and deliberate, landing on Daniel's thigh. Not forceful, not rushed, just a simple touch, heavy with suggestion. Daniel flinched, but he didn't pull away. The faceless lens captured everything. The slight tremor in his leg, the twitch of Ethan's fingers, the way Daniel's hands gripped the seat as though bracing for impact. "You should stop," Daniel whispered, but even as he said it, his body betrayed him, leaning ever so slightly toward the heat radiating from Ethan. Ethan's smile was faint, more dangerous for its subtlety. "Tell me to stop, and I will." Daniel's breath shuddered. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The silence between them was thick, charged, a battlefield where no one moved but everything shifted. Then Ethan leaned in, closing the last inch of space. His lips brushed Daniel's, tentative for a heartbeat, then certain. The kiss was not gentle, it was hungry, testing, bold. Daniel froze at first, his mind screaming in protest, his ring digging into his palm as his fist clenched tight. But the longer Ethan lingered, the weaker his resistance became. Daniel's lips parted. He kissed back. The car fogged around them, windows clouding with heat and breath. The faceless imagery told the story better than expressions ever could. Hands gripping fabric, knuckles white, Daniel's head tipping back against the seat as if surrendering, Ethan's hand sliding higher on his thigh, pulling him closer. When the kiss finally broke, both were breathing hard, chests rising and falling like they'd just finished another round of practice. Daniel turned away quickly, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand, guilt flashing across his every movement. His ring glinted again, cruel in its reminder. "I can't," Daniel started, voice fractured. "You just did," Ethan countered, his tone low, satisfied but not cruel. He reached for the ignition, turning the key halfway, letting the engine quiet into silence. The night pressed in harder, as though amplifying everything they had just done. Daniel leaned forward, head in his hands, heart pounding. He could still taste Ethan, still feel the imprint of his touch. His marriage, his promises, his carefully built life, all of it flickered before him, suddenly fragile, suddenly at risk. But beneath the guilt, another truth burned hotter. He had never felt this alive. Ethan leaned closer, voice almost a whisper. "This doesn't have to end here." Daniel looked up sharply, torn between fear and desire. His chest heaved, his jaw tightened, but his silence gave him away. Outside, the flickering streetlight buzzed, casting them in flashes of shadow and glow. Inside the car, the air was heavy with the weight of choices already made. Daniel didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence was permission. Ethan smiled, starting the car again, shifting into drive. "Let's go somewhere we won't be interrupted." The lot disappeared in the rearview mirror, swallowed by darkness. Daniel sat rigid, every nerve on fire, knowing the night was no longer safe. Something had been unleashed, and there was no going back. City blurred past in streaks of light as Ethan's car cut through the quiet street. Daniel sat stiff in the passenger seat, fingers tapping nervously against his thigh, his wedding ring cold against his skin. He told himself to open the door at the next red light, to walk away, to go home where safety and routine waited. But he didn't. He stayed, silent, burning with everything he couldn't say. Ethan's grip on the wheel was steady, confident. He didn't ask Daniel if he was sure. He didn't need to. The silence was already an answer. When the car pulled into Ethan's apartment complex, Daniel's pulse quickened. The building was dark, most windows black, the hour too late for witnesses. They climbed the narrow stairs, their footsteps echoing softly. The faceless lens caught fragments. Ethan's hand brushing Daniel's back as they walked, Daniel's clenched jaw as he hesitated at the doorway, the key turning in the lock with a finality that felt like crossing a line. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cologne and laundry. Shadows stretched across the walls. Ethan tossed his keys on the counter and turned to Daniel, who lingered near the door as if he could still change his mind. "You can go," Ethan said simply, voice low, steady. "Or you can stay." Daniel's chest rose and fell with a shudder. He knew the right choice, the safe choice, the loyal choice. But his body moved before his conscience could stop it. He stayed. The first kiss inside was fiercer, stripped of hesitation. Daniel grabbed at Ethan like a drowning man clinging to the surface, desperate and reckless. Ethan responded in kind, hands pulling Daniel closer, pressing him against the wall, mouths colliding in a hunger that words could never carry. Faceless, the scene came alive in fragments. Daniel's ringed hand fisting Ethan's shirt, Ethan's fingers digging into Daniel's waist, the shadow of two bodies pressed together, breathing hard, refusing to part. Clothes fell in silence, piece by piece, scattered across the floor. Shoes kicked aside, shirts tugged over heads, pants half peeled before hands intervened to finish the job. The camera never rose above their shoulders. Only glimpses of backs arching, muscles tightening, skin meeting skin with the urgency of something forbidden and unstoppable. Daniel gasped between kisses, his voice low, torn between confession and surrender. "I shouldn't." "Then don't stop," Ethan growled against his lips, silencing him with another kiss. The bed was unmade, sheets tangled, but neither cared. They collapsed onto it with the weight of men starved for something more than comfort. Daniel's body trembled with guilt, every nerve screaming betrayal, but beneath it burned a hunger too fierce to deny. Ethan met it, matched it, pushed him further. Every movement was bold, unapologetic. Ethan's hands roamed with certainty, exploring what Daniel had hidden from himself for too long. Daniel responded with desperation, his moans muffled against Ethan's shoulder, his nails leaving trails on skin. The Faceless camera told the story through sensation, the rhythm of bodies moving in sync, the sheet pulled taut and slipping free, the arch of Daniel's back, the tightening grip of Ethan's hand around his wrist. Shadows swallowed their faces, leaving only the raw, physical truth of desire captured in fragments of motion and breath. Time blurred. Minutes, hours. It was impossible to tell. What mattered was the urgency, the release, the way Daniel whispered Ethan's name like a confession in the dark. For every second of pleasure, guilt gnawed at the edges, but neither man stopped. They couldn't. When it ended, the room was thick with heat, sheets damp with sweat, breaths ragged. Daniel lay on his back, chest heaving, staring at the ceiling as if it held answers. Beside him, Ethan stretched lazily, unbothered, his arm draped across Daniel's stomach. "You feel alive, don't you?" Ethan murmured, half-smile curling at his lips. Daniel shut his eyes, unable to answer. His body hummed with satisfaction, but his mind screamed with betrayal. He thought of his wife asleep at home, waiting, trusting. He thought of the vows he'd spoken years ago, now cracked and fragile. And yet, when Ethan's fingers traced idle patterns across his skin, Daniel didn't move away. For a moment, there was peace in the aftermath. Then the weight of reality returned. Daniel sat up suddenly, heart racing. "I need to go." Ethan leaned on his elbow, watching him. "You don't have to run. Not from me." Daniel shook his head, searching for his clothes in the dark. His shirt lay crumpled near the bedpost, his pants tossed by the door, his shoes somewhere in the shadows. He pulled them on quickly, his movements frantic, as though dressing fast enough could erase what had just happened. "You think this ends here?" Ethan asked quietly. Daniel froze, shirt half-buttoned, breath caught. Ethan's voice was calm, certain. "It won't. You'll come back. Because you want this. And because I want you." Daniel's throat tightened. He finished dressing without a word, grabbed his bag, and moved toward the door. His hand lingered on the handle, his reflection staring back in the glass pane. His ring gleamed faintly, cruel and accusing. Without turning, he whispered, "I can't keep doing this." Behind him, Ethan's voice was steady, unshaken. "Then tell yourself that. But when you're lying in bed tonight, you'll remember me. And you'll want more." Daniel closed his eyes, chest heavy, and stepped into the night. The hallway was quiet, the apartment door closing softly behind him. But the silence didn't bring relief. It brought hunger. The sun had barely risen when Daniel slipped quietly into his house. The front door closed with a muted click, the sound small but sharp in his ears. He paused in the hallway, shoes dangling from his hand, heart racing as if he were a thief caught in the act. The house smelled of coffee and laundry detergent, familiar scents that should have comforted him. Instead, they pressed against him like accusations. His wife was still asleep, her form curled beneath the blankets when he peeked into the bedroom. She looked peaceful, untouched by the night he had just lived. Daniel undressed silently, slipping into bed beside her. The mattress shifted under his weight, and she stirred briefly, murmuring his name before settling again. Her hand drifted instinctively across his chest, resting on him in the easy intimacy of years together. The faceless lens captured the image, her hand still, his chest rising and falling too fast, the cold gleam of the wedding ring against her skin. Daniel lay rigid, staring at the ceiling. Ethan's touch still burned on his body, phantom trails of fingers and lips impossible to shake. The bed smelled like home, but his skin smelled like betrayal. He felt split, torn between two worlds, and both demanded loyalty. Sleep never came. He slipped out of bed as dawn spread across the room, pulling on a shirt and pacing the kitchen. Every creak of the floorboard seemed like judgment. He poured coffee but didn't drink it. He stared out the window, hands clenched around the mug, mind replaying every moment of the night. The kiss in the car, the press of Ethan's body, the way his own resistance had collapsed into hunger. The vibration of his phone startled him. A message lit the screen. Ethan, last night wasn't the end. Daniel's pulse quickened. His first instinct was to delete it, to erase the evidence, to pretend. But his thumb hovered, frozen, rereading the words until they seared into him. He wanted to reply. He hated that he wanted to. His hands trembled as he typed and erased, typed again. Finally, he shoved the phone face down on the counter, ashamed of his weakness. The hours dragged. His wife bustled into the kitchen, yawning, smiling, kissing his cheek as though nothing had changed. Daniel smiled back, mechanical, hollow. He asked about her plans for the day, nodded at her answers, pretended to listen. Inside, guilt coiled tighter, but so did longing. Later, alone in the shower, the water pounded against his back, scalding hot. He braced his hands against the tile, head bowed, steam curling around him. The faceless lens caught only fragments, the water cascading down his shoulders, his ring clinking faintly against the tile, his breath coming hard and shallow. He scrubbed his skin raw, but Ethan's touch refused to wash away. When he closed his eyes, it wasn't his wife he saw in flashes of memory. It was Ethan. Always Ethan. By evening, Daniel's resolve had thinned. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his phone, the weight of temptation pressing down on him. He told himself he wouldn't reply. That last night had been a mistake, a moment of weakness, never to be repeated. But denial rang false in his own ears. The message blinked again. Ethan, I know you're thinking about me. Don't lie to yourself. Daniel exhaled sharply, running a hand over his face. He should block the number. He should delete it. Instead, he typed back before he could stop himself. Daniel, this has to stop. The reply was instant. Ethan, then why are you still here, answering me? Daniel's throat tightened. His phone slipped from his hand, landing on the bedspread beside him. He stared at the ceiling, torn open by truth. The conflict consumed him. On one side, loyalty, safety, the life he had built with vows and trust. On the other, fire, risk, and a hunger that made him feel alive in a way he hadn't in years. He knew he couldn't have both. But choosing meant breaking, and breaking meant losing a piece of himself. That night, as his wife leaned against him on the couch, her head on his shoulder, Daniel's eyes drifted again and again to the phone glowing on the table. The faceless camera lingered on the scene, her trust heavy in the way she rested against him, his restless hand tapping against his leg, the phone screen lighting with Ethan's name. The final message came just as silence settled around them. Ethan, this isn't over. It's only beginning. Daniel closed his eyes, his wife's hand warm on his arm, his pulse racing with betrayal. He didn't move. He didn't answer. But deep down, he knew Ethan was right. The story wasn't ending. It was unfolding.